missile was launched from a Sukhoi 30 MKI fighter jet, a twin-engine Indian aircraft capable of carrying heavy payloads deep into enemy airspace. The plane took off under the cover of night. It flew low to avoid radar. Then, just outside the Pakistani border, the pilot hit the pickle button, and the BrahMos missile was released. The Stage 2 missile dropped like a stone for a second, then caught the air, kicked on its ramjet, and shot forward at nearly Mach 3. It flew low and fast, hugging the terrain to be virtually invisible, and then curved towards Bahawalpur. This is where Jaish-e-Mohammed had its airbase. And it's not just some dusty camp. It's a massive complex. Barracks, training grounds, administration offices, weapons caches, and reportedly a communications hub for cross-border terror operations like we saw on April 22nd. India has been tracking the location for years, and on May 10th, it went up in flames. According to eyewitnesses on the ground, some of whom posted shaky cell phone footage before the cell service was cut, the explosion was massive. It flattened part of the complex and started fires that took hours to contain. Pakistani sources put the death toll at over 50, and Indian intelligence sources say multiple senior operatives were believed to be present during the strike. At the same time, another BrahMos missile was in the air, this one heading for Muridke. That's the known base of Lashkar-e-Taiba, the terrorist group responsible for the 2008 Mumbai attacks and dozens of other violent attacks. This missile targeted a facility believed to be a training site, complete with tunnels, firing ranges, and vehicle infrastructure. The explosion hit right at the heart of the camp. Some reports say the shockwave collapsed parts of the underground area. 2 more targets were hit using other weapon systems, like a combination of Indian-made Crystal Maze 2 missiles, hammer-guided munitions, Scalp cruise missiles, and Spice 2000 smart bombs. These were used for medium-range precision strikes on locations that didn't require the speed or range of BrahMos. But BrahMos got the headline, because BrahMos has never been used before. This was its first time in war. Now, let's get into BrahMos. Beginning development in 2001 and deployed with all branches by 2007, India had held the BrahMos as a kind of ace up its sleeve. It displays in parades, it was fired in tests, it was discussed in defense forums, but it had never been pulled out for an actual combat mission, until now. And what a powerful reveal. They used it deep inside of enemy territory. That changes the story. That's not just a technical success, that's a strategic message. And Pakistan has no response. The entire operation was coordinated. While the BrahMos jets were in the air, drone jammers were activated. Radar countermeasures were deployed. Satellite assets were redirected to monitor the strike area in real time. Anti-air threats were tracked. Indian forces used the Akash missile defense system to guard against retaliation. Every part of the operation was designed not just to succeed, but to show that India could do this again and again and again if necessary. And it all worked, with domestically produced equipment. One Indian official described it as a proof of concept for total precision warfare, using our own tools on our own terms. That's important, because India has been pushing for self-reliance in defense, what it calls a self-sufficient Bharat. That means building, launching, and using Indian-made weapons, not borrowing technology or buying parts, not depending or waiting for permission. And in this operation, the BrahMos wasn't the only indigenous system to be in play. India also used anti-drone tech, signal disruptors, and long-range infrared targeting designed and built in Indian labs. Prahlada Ramarao, the developer of the Akash missile defense system, said it brought tears to his eyes when he saw his system in action, protecting people. Meanwhile, back in Lucknow, Indian Defense Minister Rajnath Singh had just cut the ribbon on the new BrahMos production facility days before the strike. The factory is meant to ramp up production to supply not just the Indian military, but export customers, like the Philippines, Vietnam, and potentially Indonesia. The timing couldn't have been more symbolic. Missiles made in India, fired successfully in combat, and the strike resounds around the world. It hit its mark. And politically, this wasn't subtle. In the hours following the strike, Prime Minister Narendra Modi made a televised statement. He didn't name Pakistan. He didn't have to. But he did say one thing loud and clear, that India will not be held hostage to nuclear blackmail anymore. That's a loaded sentence. For decades, Pakistan has operated under a nuclear umbrella. It's said openly and repeatedly that any large-scale Indian attack could trigger a nuclear response. But India is done blinking. They launched the strike and made it sting. And Pakistan's response? Nothing. Just more drones and rockets over the border, like usual. And now they've entered into a shaky ceasefire, and hopefully the fighting stops. Of course, state-sponsored terrorist groups don't necessarily follow ceasefires. But India's enemies now have to deal with a new fact. BrahMos is not just a threat, it's a weapon that works, and a weapon that gets used. So let's break down the weapon itself. BrahMos isn't just fast, it's brutal. And what makes it so terrifying isn't just the speed. It's the fact that now we know it works. In real war, under pressure, with no second chances. How does it work? And why are the militaries around the world suddenly paying attention? Well, first, BrahMos is a cruise missile, not a ballistic missile. That means it doesn't fly high into space and come crashing back down to Earth like a rock. It flies within the atmosphere, using wings and fins and air pressure, staying low to the ground, hugging the Earth like a hawk in a combat dive. It's not flying at you as much as it's flying under your radar. At its core, BrahMos is a two-stage missile. The first stage is a solid fuel booster. That's what kicks it into the air when it's launched and gives BrahMos the initial burst of speed and altitude. When the second stage takes over, a ramjet engine that breathes air from the atmosphere and compresses it using the missile's own motion. That means BrahMos doesn't need to carry both fuel and an oxidizer like a rocket. It just needs the initial burst of speed and air to breathe. Once it's up and running, that engine propels the missile at speeds of around Mach 3. That's about 1 kilometer per second. For comparison, a Tomahawk cruise missile, used by the US, travels at Mach 0.75, less than a quarter of the speed of the Indian missile. And it's more than an interesting statistic. It's modern warfare. Speed kills. It gives the enemy less time to react, less time to shoot it down, less time to warn anyone. If BrahMos is coming, you've got a very immediate problem. Seconds, maybe less. And if you're in a warship, a command center, or an underground base, seconds are not enough. The missile would take approximately 8 minutes to cover its 500-kilometer range. And range is another interesting point. Let's talk about range. For a long time, BrahMos was limited to 290 kilometers, just under 200 miles. That's because of the Missile Technology Control Regime, or MTCR, an international agreement that limited export missiles to a 300-kilometer range. But when India joined the MTCR in 2016, the restriction was lifted. Now BrahMos is reaching 500 kilometers. Some versions may soon push past 800. And if you're watching closely, there's talk of a future BrahMos variant that could hit 1,500 kilometers, or nearly 1,000 miles, putting Chinese targets like Chengdu or even Beijing in range. You don't need a fleet of bombers if you have a missile that can go thousands of miles and hit its targets within minutes. You don't need a warning. You just need to push a button and watch if you choose to. However, as a fire-and-forget weapon, even that is optional. Now for the warhead. BrahMos isn't nuclear, at least none of the current versions are. It's a conventional weapon, but that doesn't mean it's weak. The missile can carry a 200 to 300 kilogram warhead, depending on the version. That's enough to sink a destroyer-class ship, flatten a building, punch through a bunker, or wipe out a terrorist base the size of a football field. And this thing is really smart for a weapon. BrahMos has an onboard guidance system that uses inertial navigation, GPS, and active radar homing. That means it knows where it is, knows where you are, and can adjust mid-flight if you move. The final approach is probably the most interesting thing about the BrahMos shows. It goes into a terminal maneuver by zigzagging side to side, jinking around just enough to throw off missile defense systems, before locking in, gaining altitude, and striking center mass. BrahMos is a universal missile, and that's not just a marketing term, it's a tactical reality. You can launch it from a truck, like a land-based mobile launcher, a ship, a vertical launch system, a submarine, an underwater tube launch, a jet like the Su-30 MKI, and that makes it hard to predict. If you're defending against BrahMos, you don't just need to watch the skies. You need to watch everything. You need satellites, radar, sonar, human intelligence, and luck. Because if you miss the launch, you only have minutes to wait for the explosions. The version India used in Operation Sindoor was the air-launched BrahMos A, fired from an Su-30 MKI fighter jet. That's one of the more advanced variants. The Su-30 had to be specifically modified to carry the missile because BrahMos is absolutely massive. About 8.4 meters long and weighing over 2,500 kilograms. Picture a Ford F-150 with a bed full of bricks. When launched from an aircraft, BrahMos can fly longer, faster, and stealthier. This plane gives it an extra altitude and forward velocity. It allows India to launch the missile without having to bring a launcher within range. It also complicates defense, because now BrahMos isn't just a ground-launched weapon. It's a highly mobile, highly portable air shark. There's also a ship-launched version used by the Indian Navy. It's been deployed on destroyers like the INS Kolkata, INS Vishakhapatnam, and other frontline vessels. These ships can fire BrahMos in salvos, multiple missiles at once, to overwhelm enemy defenses. If one gets shot down, 2 more are coming right behind it. There's even a submarine-launched BrahMos, which means the Indian Navy could hit you without ever showing you the launch. It just comes out of the water, and then it's coming straight at you at Mach 3. Now, the real future of BrahMos is even more terrifying. It's something called the BrahMos 2. That's the hypersonic version. Hypersonic means Mach 5 and above. That's 5 times the speed of sound. That's a mile every second. That's faster than most radar systems can track, and faster than any current air defense system can intercept. Although there is a Japanese railgun currently under development that looks compelling. The goal for BrahMos 2 is Mach 7, nearly 8,600 kilometers per hour. For comparison, that's over twice as fast as a rifle bullet, and almost 10 times faster than a commercial jet. BrahMos 2 isn't here yet, it's still being developed, but the day it arrives, it will instantly become likely the fastest operational weapon in the world. And India will be one of the few countries to have it. Right now, only Russia, China, and possibly the US have hypersonic weapons in testing or limited use. But none of them are exporting them. None of them are this close to deployment. And unlike systems in development, BrahMos isn't a sketch or a whiteboard project. It's real. It's flying. It's being sold globally. And now, it's being used against Pakistan. That's why Operation Sindoor was so important, because it proved that BrahMos can perform under real pressure. It's easy to hit a dummy target in a desert during a calm day. It's a lot harder to drop a missile into a live, defended facility in the middle of a region on high alert, with electronic jamming, enemy radar, bad weather, and political stakes through the roof. But India did it several times in a single day. And now, it's a lot more than a missile. It's a sales pitch. And it's a warning. It's a reputation. Any country thinking about buying it just watched it work perfectly in an integrated system of Indian technology. And any enemy thinking about testing India just saw what happens when you go too far. For most of its modern history, India's military posture was defined by caution. It waited, it warned. It absorbed first strikes and fought back only when there was no other option. And when it did strike, it tried to do so quietly under the radar without shaking the global order too much. But that posture has clearly changed. Under Prime Minister Narendra Modi, India has grown more assertive, more visible, and more willing to take risks. It's not reckless, but it's not shy either. And Operation Sindoor just proved the concept. When Modi came to power in 2014, he brought with him the language of nationalist strength. India, he said, should no longer apologize for defending itself. It should no longer fear escalation every time it is attacked. And most of all, it should not let terrorism hide behind nuclear threats. That was the message after Pulwama in 2019, when a Pakistani-based terror group killed 40 Indian military personnel in a suicide bombing. India responded with airstrikes in Balakot, deep inside of Pakistani territory. At the time, that was already a big step. It was the first time in decades that India had conducted overt cross-border airstrikes without trying to downplay their hand. But even then, India didn't use its top-tier weapons. But now they have. With Operation Sindoor, India went further than Balakot. It used BrahMos, its fastest cruise missile. It struck multiple sites. It did so in coordination with other high-end munitions. And it did it without even blinking, even under the shadow of Pakistan's nuclear arsenal. That was Modi's political and military doctrine in action. Modi's government has made it clear. If you strike India with terror, India will strike you with precision. It won't wait or ask for permission, and it certainly won't apologize.